Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Richard Lewis Show. And joining me today, we have the former, actually, was it president or commissioner?
Neither. It was general manager and vice president of Esports.
See, I knew there was a president in there. If I fuck it, I'm going to start that again. But I might tell Sam to leave this bit in because it would be funny that
Just
I can't
keep this
even
whole
remember.
thing in.
Yeah,
I think
why
it's
not?
great.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Richard Lewis Show. And joining me this time, we have the former general manager of ELEAGUE, my old boss and good friend, Christina Alejandre. Thanks for joining me. See, I felt that casual. I didn't even research what it was you used to do.
I mean, that's completely fine. This will probably be your least viewed show.
These are important for posterity, though, because, you know, the thing that annoys me is so many people ask questions about these like key moments in esports, right? Which you played a major part in. You know, I was there too. And when people come along who are capable of answering those questions, everyone just fucking ignores it. And then 3 months down the road, going, oh, yeah, what actually happened to ELEAGUE? So I'm hoping this will serve as a definitive, you know, kind of summary of it from two people who were there from start to finish. But before we even get into ELEAGUE, you know, which is where we met, you know, I'd sort of been vaguely aware of your existence prior to that. Even though, as we'll get to, it was always framed to me. She doesn't know what she's talking about with esports. She used to work on Infinite Crisis. You can't believe anything she says. You know,
Infinite Crisis, no more.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, you used to be at ESL, right?
Yeah, I consulted there. You know, I'm a behind the scenes person, which is why I just joke like this will be your least watched thing because, you know, I'm not big on social media. If I am on social media, most likely it is pictures of my cats. I don't really like being in the forefront, despite the fact that I'm doing this podcast with you today. But yeah, I mean, I've been in the video game industry now for over 2 decades, and it did start with Infinite Crisis. You know, I was with Warner Brothers Games, and they were like, "We have this game. It's a MOBA, and we want you to investigate esports." And I was like. Someone told me also not to say that this was my reaction, but I don't fucking care. Like, I was like, what the fuck? Like, I was actually like a little miffed that he was assigning me esports to do. Cause I had this preconceived notion that it was just kids like playing in their mom's basement. And like, why do I want to waste my publishing dollars on, you know, that? And, but I went to a now defunct IPL event. It was a League of Legends in one ballroom and StarCraft in another ballroom. But I went to the League of Legends event. I actually met Odie there for he was one of the first like major esports people that I had met. And I just became hooked. I was like, this is amazing. This is a huge spectator sport. This is great. And so when I was at Warner Brothers, I really kind of just immersed myself into the scene and just tried to kind of figure out the best way to grow our program, and laid a lot of foundational things that Warner Brothers Games still uses to this day for some of their esports that they do. But while I was there, we partnered with Major League Gaming, we partnered with ESL, and then the game crashed and burned. I mean, it was difficult to put a MOBA out against Dota and League of Legends, right? Like, because you're not just pulling Richard over. I'm pulling Richard over and all of Richard's friends, right? Like, and so it's really hard to take that away from people. I think it was a really fun game, and I'm not just saying that because I worked on it. Like, I played the shit out of Infinite Crisis, and I had a lot of fun playing it. But the game, you know, went under, and then when it went under, ESL said, hey, do you maybe want to come work here? And I said, I don't know if I want to move back to Los Angeles, but I'll go out and I'll consult for you guys. And, you know, maybe we'll see if it could work long-term. And so I was out there, and, you know, they had just opened their Burbank studios, and I was working, you know, with Craig Levine and Han Park and that team to really help kind of operationalize their studios. And so I was out there, and we started talking about full-time, and the ELEAGUE position. So Kotaku had an article.
Good old Kotaku.
It said no one alive could fit Turner's esports position. And it was like, had to have worked for a game publisher before, work with developers, and be knowledgeable about esports and event production and all that stuff. And it was a pretty wild job description that they had. And so on a lark, I just put together this like super cheeky cover letter that was like, saw this article and cited the Kotaku article. And I just said, I just want to let you know that I actually am alive, and here are all of the things, like why I'm qualified. And they're at the end of their process, but the recruiter just, I guess he was impressed by the charm of my letter. I don't know. And set up a call like within a couple days, and I had chatted with him, and I think he kind of realized like, holy shit, like this is actually the background that we are looking for, and we haven't found it in anyone. And he got off the phone with me, and he said, I have a call with Craig Berry, who was my boss at Turner. I have a call with Craig later today to give him an update on where we are with our candidates and potential offers, but I think it's more important that you talk to him today. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I got on the phone with Craig. Craig, I think, realized like, hey, this is the person that we've been looking for with this weird combination of experience that we kind of put out in the universe. And then that's what got me in at ELEAGUE. It was a little bit bananas. It was very quick. And, ESL wanted me to stay. And, it was a hard discussion because I'm, good friends with Craig Levine, and I really, respect what he's doing. I know you've had your challenges with ESL, but, I love Craig. And
my challenges with everyone, to be fair. I mean, it's just a never ending procession of conflict,
And so, but I ended up going there and kind of commuting from Atlanta to Boston and stuff like that. And then that's when we met.
Yeah. Were you expecting to be as front and center? Because one of the things I thought was really interesting was, you were announced, with a photo shoot, and, usually a GM or someone that's kind of presiding over a league project like that, you're generally in with the suits. It's like you're making executive decisions in the executive boardroom. But the way this was being framed was almost as if you were an additional member of the broadcast team. Very public facing. I remember you doing a fucking ton of interviews.
Yeah.
I mean, I when I was researching this, a lot of them have gone down because the websites that did them aren't there. But mainstream media, interviews and huge puff pieces about you, and there you are in your ELEAGUE hoodie and everything. So was it a bit surreal because, like you say, you've always been a background person. Now suddenly, before the talent kind of got there, you were the face of the league.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I had to do some interviews for when we were with Infinite Crisis, and we were putting together videos for the game or whatever, and I detested being on camera, like detested, and I would get really, really nervous. So because I'm not a talent person, right? Like I'm not used to that. And at one point, because I was the director of esports or whatever at Warner Brothers games. And I remember like the camera went on and they're like, okay, just say your name and your title. And I was like, my name's Christina Esports. I'm the director of Alejandre. Like I couldn't get my name and title out, right? Like my brain would go blank. And so I remember having the conversation with Craig when I first started, and I wasn't expecting it. I knew that they said, you can't update your LinkedIn. You can't really be public about this until we put out a press release. And that's when I started getting like the first inkling of like, oh, like this is a big deal. This isn't just like me starting in a new position, right? Yeah. Like I have to wait until a press release comes out. And so they were waiting on, I believe, Min6 move to the United States, because as you know, because you had to make the move as well, there were a lot of hoops to jump through. I mean, like Thorin hit those hoops, right? Because he missed the first couple of weeks of ELEAGUE because
he got RFE'd. So that's like a request for further evidence, which they do that now as standard. So
And so I had to wait until Minsick came over, and then, they put out this press release, and all of a sudden I'm in, Variety magazine. And like, and for me, who started out in kind of Hollywood, like me being in Variety magazine, I was like, I don't even know what's going on. And so we started getting press requests. And I remember sitting in Craig's office, and, Craig was like, I'm glad you're here, because now I can split up this. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, like you're going to be the person that's going to be the speaker of, ELEAGUE. And look, I can handle myself in a meeting. I can handle myself in a presentation, because that's just what I've been doing my whole career. But it actually made me really nervous. And, Minsick, English is not his first language. He speaks English fluently. He's very, he's very good, in English, but he definitely does not feel comfortable speaking. And so they kept on just putting me in all of the like press conferences or interviews, or, things that were recorded. Thanks to Nate and Turia, Nate Smeltz, who's the head of PR for all of Turner Sports, and Turia,
bailed me out a few times. Love that man.
Yep. I love him. Just spoke to him a couple weeks ago. Nate and Turia like really kind of worked with me to like help me with my presence. I think I also, like, once you and I became friends, like I would talk to you about it too, because I just wasn't used to being in front of the camera. Right. And so that was a very long answer to like, no, that is not something that I was expecting. It did freak me out. I don't think I'm ever going to be 100% comfortable in front of the camera. But it just became an everyday thing though, right? Like half my job was educating people about esports, right? So like half the time I was flying around to different panels and different speaking events and press events and stuff like that, just to kind of expound the words of ELEAGUE, and then like make people understand what esports was in an industry where it was fairly nascent.
Do you think, prior to the conceptualization of ELEAGUE and the execution of it, do you think the guys at Turner, because it's a great network for experimentation, Adult Swim is a sort of testimony to that, but do you think they actually had a handle on what esports was? Because when we attended sort of the very early meetings, when it was like team owners, I was there for reasons I still don't understand to this day. They were saying things, and there was a little bit of resistance from the team owner side. Valve were there too, and it was like, it was very clear they understood broadcasting and they understood storytelling perhaps better than anyone I've ever seen, in a meeting room. But I still think they were a little bit sort of behind the curve when it came to esports. Did you get that impression too?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I think that the great thing is they were willing to learn. But I think sometimes that sentiment can be overshadowed with the fact that they're this big sports, stick and ball sports behemoth, right? And WME is another behemoth, right, on the agency side. And so, I think sometimes it could have come across as like, yeah, we want to learn, but, we know what we're doing. And I think there was a little bit of that, but I think they genuinely wanted to learn and wanted to grow and really wanted to get into the space. I think that they made some good hires, and by good hires, I don't mean like me, but I think that they went out of what their normal comfort zone would be when hiring certain people into the process to help educate them. When I started, I was able to bring in Nick, right? And Nick Ranish, and, Craig gave me no pushback on that, because I was like, first of all, like, you can't argue with this kid's experience, right? Like, he was a pro player, he was a commentator, he produced events, he taught, he's actually the OG professor, by the way. Like, he taught, and he's worked for a publisher, he's done all this stuff. And so I think they were really willing to bring that in. That's tempered with, there are a lot of people that were internal guys and gals that came into it as well. And that was definitely, I think, a balance too, is trying to kind of figure out how to get new things pushed forward within a big corporate environment. But I think they wanted to learn. But I think that they were a little bit of like, we're not quite sure what we're doing. Because in those beginning meetings too, I was not in those meetings, right? Because they hired Minsick and Toby before they hired me.
Yeah.
And so, but that was the WME side of the equation. So Turner Sports like didn't have their person, right? Like, so they were totally reliant on WME kind of guiding them. So I think there was a little bit, especially prior to me starting, of like, okay, we'll follow your lead, but we also know what we're doing too. And they didn't have somebody that was kind of there to be like, okay, let's think about it this way. Let's think about how to integrate it this way, blah, 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 blah. So I think in those initial meetings, the vibe that you probably got was a little bit of like, okay, whatever you want, WME, because we're brand new to this.
Yeah, it was, I mean, you know, one of the things that really sort of like permeated the time there for me, and it's why it's like a bittersweet time in my life, is just the sheer amount of fucking stress. And that was predicated on the political landscape, you know, so it's no mystery. You know, I fucking blew up in weight because I was comfort eating and boozing like unbelievably hard. Not just because of the work that was being put in, but because there was this new standard being applied to me about what I could and couldn't say on social media. You know,
I mean, it goes back to like when you and I first met, right? There was a lot of confusion on both sides, and we had people telling us on both sides that you and I should be enemies from the get-go.
Yeah, well, I mean, somebody, you know? Somebody specifically told me coming into it, be wary about Christina. Christina never wanted you on the broadcast. She's a radical feminist. You're a radical feminist, right? You know, and you and her are absolutely not going to get along. If it was down to her, 50% of the league would be women's teams. Richard, you've got to fight her. And I'm like thinking, listen, I'm not for sale, and I make up my own mind about everything. So all of this fucking noise is not going to affect when I sit down and meet Christina how I react. And you remember I said to you specifically, I said, I've been told I should hate you by, you know, X,
and
Y,
I told
and
you
Z.
the same thing, you know, because people are like, oh, you got to be careful about Richard. We're bringing him in, but you know, we know it's a little bit of a risk. He definitely has a temper. Like, you want to be really careful about like how you speak to him, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he's probably going to disagree with all the decisions that you're making. Like, and it was like, just let me form my own fucking opinion, you know, like, thank you for that information, but I can also do a cursory Google search and like, I can see the good and the bad. Right. But like, I don't know. I think you and I, because of our personalities, we're just like, I was told that I'm not supposed to like you. Yeah, I was told the same thing. And then you and I were just like, yeah, now we're good friends. So,
yeah, it was so.
Fuck them all.
Because
but it has to do with the politics, right?
Yeah,
like it has.
Well, there
to
was
do
three
with...
entities. You know, we. It wasn't even that we were caught between two worlds. We were essentially caught between three, because you've got Face It as well. And so Face It, we're doing the operations. You've got the sports, you know, Turner Sports, and then you've got WME IMG, and this really uneasy alliance at times, you know, was being sort of negotiated by people like you, and you know, I made no bones about it, if you remember. I mean, like, I was repped by WME IMG, which I think is the only reason I got the job, because 2015 was a fucking nightmare for me from a PR perspective, because we had the Loader incident, we had DreamHack, Hell, and Lasell. And then at the final meeting before the project got sanctioned, Kim Rom, the fucking editor of On Game, has tried to drunkenly start a fight with me in front of all the executives. And
you were like, people were like sending me this stuff, like, you got to be careful, like, don't piss Richard off. Like,
and I was like, God, can I not get a fucking? Will people leave me alone? Can I not get a? Why is everyone trying to beat me up every 5 minutes? And so when I finally got in, I like said, listen. You know, I said to my agent at the time, who worked with my IG, I said, it's not really appropriate for you to rep me while we work on this joint venture
project together. Yeah,
because, you know, I'm going to have a disproportionate amount of influence, which I don't think is fair. So it's better we sever ties, and I'm judged by my employer, Turner Sports. And that the reaction I got for that was fucking, I'd never heard anything like it. They cursed me to the ends of the earth. And so I was in this position now where I had to be completely aligned. Turner Sports were the only people in my fucking corner at that point, right? It was so crazy. So yeah, I don't know how you coped with the stress kind of on a boardroom level, because you went between those worlds a lot more than I did. I actually severed ties.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're in it, sometimes you don't realize how unhealthy certain things are, right? Until after you have a chance to kind of evaluate like your life decisions when it's over. And I think when my time at ELEAGUE ended and I look back at the stress and just how relentless it was, while it was deeply rewarding and probably one of, at least from a career perspective, one of the best times. I met some amazing people. I also ballooned up in weight. I wasn't exercising. My mental health took a toll. I was riddled with anxiety. There were all of these things that were just so patently unhealthy that I think that if I didn't make the friends that I made down there, right? Like we both made some really close and lifelong friendships there, including you and I don't think I would have survived. It was, you just look back and it's just like the amount of pressure. And then also to your point with your first question of like, were you prepared with the amount of like press and, publicity around this? There was a lot of pressure there. And I think I said it on a panel too one time, because I'm a radical feminist, I'll talk about the women's stuff, but because I talked on a panel and someone had asked me about like the pressure of being the GM of, ELEAGUE, and if the lens of being a woman, is on you for that. And I said, absolutely. Because I feel like if a man had failed at an ELEAGUE had just blown up and failed, they would have been like, well, there are all these factors like blah, 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 and this and this and this. And I do feel like with women, if I failed, right, it would be like, well, she had no fucking clue what she was doing anyway. She had no business.
Oh yeah, you were being set up. I mean, even I could see that, all the narrative had been front loaded that if the league tanked, we would get a second chance by throwing you under the bus. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And the thing is it's like, I think at the time, and now it's amazing to see all these like other women in the sport, but at the time, I think I was the only woman in the world that was running a large esports organization, like period. And so like, there were just a lot of eyes on me. Right. And, the amount of pressure, right. And some of it is my own, right, that I put on myself and the stories that I tell myself about the pressure. But either way, it was just not healthy. And so nowadays, and not to fast forward but nowadays it's like, I really prioritize like self-care, because I can't go through the like hangover of like realizing all these like shitty life decisions that I was making in my personal life, right? How they affected me in such a profound way. And so there's a lot of pressure, and even within Turner, there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of stress. They have, very specific ways that they like to do things. They have certain pecking orders, right? Of, who gets a say, who doesn't get a say, balancing all of those people and all of those decisions, and also trying to be innovative, right? Because that's what we had to be. We had to find ways to kind of innovate and get esports out there. The ratings were never through the roof, the television ratings. We did great on Twitch and, the digital platforms, but as far as television, like the ratings were fine. They just weren't like anything to write home about. It's not like they weren't worth like the press release, like they just weren't worthy of like a press release. And so it's,
well, I want to ask you about that actually, because I mean, I remember it being, look, we all know there's a layer of bullshit that comes with an entertainment business job, and you can't tell the troops. Ratings are super important, and if the ratings are low, you're going to get cancelled, because that's like, No one's going to come out and say that. It's going to put everyone on off kilter, and maybe you're not going to do your best work. So we were specifically told, obviously, look, we're in this for the long haul. Ignore the ratings. We're going to build things. It's about more than that. It's not just about the TV viewership. And then I do remember talking to one of the executives, and they said, listen, if we wake up tomorrow and we've got a 0.5 rating, we know we've got something here. And that was for our very first broadcast, and we got a 0.2. And so that was really weird for me, because I kind of think I'm a guy that reads between the lines anyway. And so I felt like I went from this incredible high of like, holy shit, I just did a live TV show on like American TV for our very first broadcast, into the next day when the Nielsen ratings came out overnight, to realizing that in my mind, we'd fallen short of a target, and that this was actually going to be a real hard slog, and probably we were going to get canceled at some point. What about you from an executive level in terms of the E-League ratings? How important were those ratings then, and maybe the lack of growth to kind of where we're at now, where E-League kind of just dips in and out of broadcasting and programming?
Yeah, I think that I think it was a really good press release, PR opportunity, right? To be like, we're putting esports on television. But we knew that we were trying to open it up to a new audience and have people watch it. And, we knew that our ratings would probably be low and maybe grow. I think what saved us was digitally, right? On Twitch, we did great, right? Yeah. And then you have Robert Occolini and Derek Moore and that team really innovating on the digital side and finding new ways to kind of interact with the brand and stuff like that. So, with the discussions, there was never really like, Christina, why are the ratings so low? We need to make the ratings higher. It was like, how can we maybe iterate to make a better product on television that might be more palatable, right? But we are also constrained with the way that television and digital work. And I'm not sure if people know this, is like television and the cable operators have very specific exclusive rights. Yeah. So you can't offer something on your cable network and have the same product be offered on like Twitch. So we had to find ways to make it a completely different Twitch broadcast than a television broadcast, or that it was different enough that it mattered. And so how can we do that? So we had that layer too. And so I think it was always like, let's just find a way to iterate. Let's iterate. I mean, I think the first season, the big learning that we learned was like, the nights were too fucking long, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, those broadcasts, and especially because it was a television pace. So it wasn't even like a Twitch pace where you could take like a longer break, right? And just do a bunch of shit or just roll a bunch of commercials or whatever. And people could go off and, I don't know, do whatever they do during the breaks. For us, it's like we had commercial breaks, we had to come back, blah, blah, blah. And that is not sustainable for a 5-hour show. Like, I think it was like the first or second week, Cloud9 was playing somebody, and it
at like, overtime. Yeah.
Like 2 or 3 in the morning, the first or second weekend. And I think all of us were like we expected those ratings to be low, because the thing is we actually started out really strong. There was a lot of interest. There was a lot of buzz, but then it's like, well, all right, it's midnight. I think I want, and these aren't people who are like hardcore fans. Those hardcore fans are watching on Twitch. So the people who are watching on TV were like, I don't want to watch this anymore. Yeah. And then it just tanked, right? And our average rating, was a 0.2 or a 0.5 or, whatever it was. So we learned to make it shorter the next. And I think it was a valuable experiment for Turner Sports, right? To just figure, like, to have this brand that they could just iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate. And so, I will say that it wasn't super difficult, but again, I think that our digital performance like saved us as a brand, right? Yeah. Like we were, especially in the esports and kind of sports world, like we were huge. Like people were talking about us. A lot more people were watching us online, right? And they were watching us at home, watching us on TBS. But yeah, so I'm with you. Like, they didn't put that pressure, right? Because they can't go like, well, if ratings are shit, you're all losing your job, because then nobody will want to work there, right?
Yeah.
But again, combined with how we were doing on the digital side, I didn't feel a ton of pressure. I always felt disappointment when I saw the ratings. It's hard not to.
Well, I mean, the worst part
but
was it was always framed with, you would see ELEAGUE, and even on our best days, you've got like a 0.43, a 0.56, and then there's a fucking 3 a.m. rerun of The Big Bang Theory with like 1 million, 2 million, like, God, we're fucking garbage. It was like, that was really hard to kind of process, like just how far behind we were mainstream viewing numbers.
Yeah. Sometimes we would luck out though and get a good lead in.
Yeah.
And that's when our ratings would go up too, especially like the baseball lead-ins, because tons of people were watching baseball and then they'd like fall asleep with their TVs on. We'd get credit for the ratings. So,
I mean, in terms of the work, though, I think, like, for me, the way I sort of remember ELEAGUE, the broadcast, we'll talk about the majors specifically in a moment, but the way I remember the sort of weekly broadcast was, it just felt like, even in 2016, where esports was meant to be like mainstream and having its big coming out party, it felt ahead of its time. It really did. The set was ridiculous. You remember, we even quickly realized that, like, on a budgetary per show, because I don't even know what we were spending per show on ELEAGUE. But, we remember how we had all the moving desk segments and all that. And people don't realize we had a whole crew of hydraulics.
That stopped after like week 3.
Yeah, and it got to week 3 and we're paying like 50 grand every time we move that fucking desk. So we're not doing that no more. But it was so great in terms of product. I look at things like Riot Games are doing now with the LCS broadcast, and they do some aspects very well. Obviously, I think that's like this, one of the best broadcasts I've ever seen. But I still think the weekly ELEAGUE show
was that hard for you to say that a Riot broadcast was one of the best broadcasts?
I mean, listen, no, obviously my distaste for them is well established at this point. But I mean, listen, the one thing I've always praised is their broadcast
production. Yeah, they were great production. I mean, I think that if I look back at the legacy of ELEAGUE and what we did there, I think that we really leveled up the production, in esports. I think everybody was like on the cusp, but I think it's like we came in, we were with Turner Sports. We took the best learnings of all of the experience that Turner Sports has, right? And made this kick-ass broadcast and combined it with like esports know-how, with like, you there and Jason Baker there and some others, right? That were really kind of helping propel it forward. And I think that we leveled it up. And I think that is the legacy that we leave, because you can see there was just this inflection point, because, and I know we're going to talk about the majors in a second, but like, we were awarded 2 majors. The first one was like within the first year of us even existing, which was like unheard of, that like just a not established kind of industry. And those types of things, I think, really kind of helped the industry. And that is not to say that the ESLs, the MLGs, of the world weren't already doing awesome things and putting on great events. I just think that like with the Turner Sports, engine, right? Like we were just able to put this kind of layer of polish on things that just didn't exist beforehand. And then it almost started becoming the gold standard, right? Like, and then eventually like companies started getting above us, but like they were racing to kind of get to the level that we were, because things started getting compared to our broadcasts, if you remember too. Right. Like,
I was going to say, I remember the ESL stuff that we had, where it was like, it wasn't just the broadcast production that we were doing that was kind of like causing waves. It was the fact we were sticking players in limousines and driving them to and from a studio. We were giving them fucking welcome fruit baskets or God knows what else. And there were a number of people in the industry that kind of felt we were treating people too well. We were shooting too high and making the whole industry sort of pale by comparison. I remember I remember more than one TO were kind of like, could you dial it down just a little bit and bring it more in line with what we're doing?
I can't remember. It might have been I can't remember what the team was, but we were at an event in New York. I was another tournament organizer. It was a really big Counter-Strike event. And so we went to the event, and then we were walking around the city, and we ran into a team that had just played in our league, and they recognized me and other people were with, and they're like, hi. And they're like, do you know where blah, blah, blah is? And we're like, oh yeah, it's like down here in blah, blah. They go, they don't treat us here like they treated us at ELEAGUE. Like, cause it's like, they were just kind of left to go find like whatever versus like, we were like, okay, like, here's where your car is, here's where you're going. Really treated it like a professional sport, and they were professional players. And, you know, I think that also is like kind of what led to like even the Astralis sponsorship when they're sponsored by Audi, right? Like Audi realized like, oh, let's treat these guys like real professional athletes that they are. Let's send cars. Let's do that, right? Versus I just don't think that was even within the realm of possibility prior to us stepping in. And I think it's also a credit to the sales team at Turner, right? Like they just found really great innovative ways to integrate the brands. So I don't know.
Yeah. And, you know, look, I mean, the big question, like for the people that do watch this, the big question people are going to have always asked on the CSGO subreddit is why won't ELEAGUE come back and do CSGO? And obviously, you know, again, I don't think I'm talking out of school to say this. You know, the budget we were putting into these episodes, while cheap by TV standards, was immense by esports standards.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to, you know, Matt Mostel as a good example. He was like saying, you know, we need to find a way to sort of package this content in a way that's you know, makes sense financially and ticks the boxes for us in terms of what the strength of the ELEAGUE brand. And, you know, we talked about doing some documentaries with it and stuff, but the reality was by that point, it was all, you know, I kind of felt the writing was already on the wall in terms of it had been 2 years. We'd, you know, our greatest achievements in terms of growth and all that was all digital. It was all on Twitch. It hadn't really made a splash on TBS. And I kind of sensed where it was going to go. So, you know, when I left, and I didn't leave for those reasons, I left for a combination of, you know, I couldn't handle the stress anymore after the FGC death threats, bodyguards stuff, and money. I got offered a ridiculous paycheck to go work in Vegas. And, you know, I just think when I see it now, when it's like, I think about the legacy and it's doing like, here's The Sims, ELEAGUE presents The Sims. You know, it really makes me a little bit sad, honestly, that I almost kind of wish it wasn't there in a way, because I know it's never coming back to what it was.
Yeah, I do wish that they, if they're not going to do kind of tier 1 or kind of top esports stuff, I do wish, and I think they're kind of evolving towards that, because I think they're starting to get it right, like towards like a more gaming brand and away from the ELEAGUE brand, right? Because ELEAGUE was esports. It was representative of like the top of the top of the top of esports. And then you have like The Sims come in and you're like, wait, what? And so it just, it hurts the brand. It kind of, I think it hurts esports a little bit too, honestly, if I'm being honest. And so, but I think that, thankfully, I think in kind of more recent months and with some changes, I think that they are kind of moving towards a gaming brand. And sadly, right, ELEAGUE's kind of just going out of camera, right? Like it's just disappearing. And I think that's more healthy for everybody all around. You know, I think to your point, shit's expensive, right? Like it's expensive what we were doing. And we were putting, Turner Sports production value into, something that not historically had gotten the budgets that we had.
It was hundreds of thousands of dollars a show.
but like, were we throwing away money like it was crazy? No, right? Like, especially compared to the other properties and how they operate, you know, at Turner Sports. But you know, I think the way that I always saw it is, yes, we were throwing a lot of money at it compared to other esports, you know, tournaments and events, but we were getting a lot more bang for our buck. So so it wasn't like just because we spent more money, things were a lot better. Like, we would spend money, but because we had all of the resources of Turner Sports, like, an incremental spend in dollars is an exponential, like, improvement on quality and stuff like that, just because of the nature that we were Turner Sports. I always saw it as a loss leader for Turner Sports and for just the Turner brand as a whole, right? Because they were really kind of looking to find ways to be more relevant, right, in the linear space. And I think that if they had continued to just treat it as such, right, and maybe found a way to kind of maybe do a little bit less on television, but kind of still stay there and still keep the brand strong, you know, I think that ELEAGUE could have survived if it was being perceived as a loss leader. I think the minute they started going like, okay, the first couple of years are over, like, this isn't so much a loss leader anymore, like, we need to start making money. I just think that's when it all fell apart. And I think it did a tremendous job as a loss leader for that brand.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
so what's your biggest regret in terms of how you either influenced or didn't influence the ELEAGUE broadcast?
Regret. I know this is a cheesy fucking answer, but I just try not to look back with regrets. Like, I just feel like everything that we did was, you know, good or bad, was a learning opportunity. I can tell you what my biggest fuck up was. That, you know, definitely my biggest fuck up was I messed up on the dates of the Atlanta major. And I gave Vandy, who's in charge of like the programming, the wrong dates. And then we booked the fabulous Fox Theater. We booked like all this shit. And then I realized that it was the day of the SAG Awards, which are plastered all over every Turner channel that day, right? So TBS, TNT, it's all the SAG Awards. And so that was like the big, and I just remember, because I'm a big proponent of like, when I fuck up. And I immediately called Craig, and he was great about it. I called Craig and he was like, hey, and I was like, I just want to let you know right now, I fucked up. And he was like, okay, like, what happened? And then I told him, and it ended up getting fixed because the timing and stuff worked out. But that was like one of the worst fuck ups. I think maybe not a regret. I think overall the way it was handled, I don't think we would have made a decision differently. And I don't even remember the full details, but I don't think our decision about it would have changed. But there was a problem, and maybe you can refresh me, and maybe you don't remember, with luminosity and like a player playing or not playing.
Yeah.
And we had to make a decision. And I think the decision that we made was a sound decision. I think that the way that we announced it and the way that we handled it was not the best way that we could have done it. But
I mean, for me,
but you live and you learn. So I don't quite regret it. It's just one of those things that sticks out to me as like one of the biggest controversies that happened,
it was. And I don't think from any fault of our own. Like, I look back on that period of time, it's like, it wouldn't even be a controversy today.
Yeah.
That's what's crazy about it. So for those who, are new, all the little Zoomers out there, there was basically an incident where one of the highly touted favorite teams at the tournament, Fallen's Brazilian CSGO team that were at Luminosity, they were in the middle of a big money move in the middle of the league, and they moved across to SK Gaming. That was negotiated at the midpoint of the season. And so what would have happened was SK Gaming would have essentially replaced their players that were already through with this team that had sort of failed to qualify.
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
Yeah, and so what we did was we stuck true to the ruling, which was the team you registered at the start of the league is the team that has to ride or die, regardless of what you do from a business perspective. And I know for a fact, actually, we were fucking the way that blew up on media, because we had journalists around all the time. I just used to sit in the green room and stare at my laptop and not talk because there was no ceilings on any of the rooms, and there was just journalists just wandering around free. It's like, right, say fucking nothing, because I know what they're like. And there were people that had an interest over with Luminosity, and they were sort of feeding information into the press to make it sound way worse than it was. Yeah. And all we were doing essentially was like, it was a registration issue. So that was our first real drama at ELEAGUE. That was the first time the community had sort of turned on us. And I think I remember talking to people like, Robert Occolini and guys like that. And they were going, what? They just hate us now? And I'm like, yes, it's the internet. Yes. Yeah. they absolutely fucking hate you now for a week.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason why I regret it is because I feel like I should have had the statement come out via ELEAGUE, and for whatever reason they had decided that Minsick would be the one that tweeted out the ruling from Minsick's account. And I think if I could look back and take back that part, I would, right? I think that it should have come from the ELEAGUE account. Instead, ELEAGUE retweeted Minsick's thing, because I think the thought was he's the commissioner. It needs to come from the commissioner, not from ELEAGUE. Yeah. But the amount of vitriol, hate, I mean, you go through this, I mean, again, it's just like another day for you, but for Minsick, it was like the amount of kind of vitriol, the amount of, hate and threats and stuff that he got, right? I think it could have been avoided. And that's the part that is, I guess, for lack of better words, regretful that we should have probably made the decision for it to come out on the ELEAGUE handle. Having said that, it wasn't just my decision, right? It was a group decision, but I feel like that part could have been handled differently. To your point about even the question before about the amount of publicity and press, and was I prepared? No, I was not prepared. And even the social media onslaught, to me, that was highly disturbing, right? That people would be threatening somebody based off a decision that we made. And some of it was naivety on my part, right? I joke. I was like, well, I guess I've made it on Twitter because someone called me a fucking bitch, and then someone called me a fucking cunt. So I've made it. Someone's called me these things. So I'm officially, on the Twitter.
And it wasn't me this time.
It wasn't you. But that, those things were that was just glancing blows for me, right? Yeah. I just remember Minsick at some point had to turn off all the notifications for his Twitter and all that stuff. And so
Brazilian fan base is a passionate one, let's say.
Yes.
So yeah, that was a tough time.
Yeah.
So the majors, as you said, we did such a good job, and I think Valve was so impressed, not just with our overall level of production, but I think we handled Valve requests with a sort of how should we say, a corporate understanding that other companies in the space don't. I mean, remember, ESL, for example, they're the company who were like, why don't we set up a franchise league and we'll plan this while Valve go away on their annual holiday to Hawaii. Valve are generally a forgiving company, but, things like that are going to rankle a bit. Whereas, the Valve guys were on site a lot for us during ELEAGUE, and sort of played an active role. There was a two-way dialogue.
They were interacting with us a ton.
Yeah, which was cool. It's I kind of miss that in CS, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we put our hat in the ring. If you remember, obviously, the first time we really kind of put our heart and soul into our proposal to get the major. And then when we were awarded it, it was amazing. We held it in Atlanta. It was such a great time. It was record breaking at the time. People were holding Arby's signs up in the audience. It was, you know, an amazing final.
And yet that event, and this is where I was going with it, yet that event isn't sort of particularly well remembered. Now, I can say, being there, and even though it was Thorin at his grumpiest,
Thorin was pretty grumpy.
He was at that event, wasn't he?
I don't remember why, but I remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either. I think it might have been, I don't know, something to do with his house. I can't remember where he was living or something. I don't know. But anyway, it was, you know, so Thorin was particularly tilted at that event. And obviously we'd had the arguments about getting Yanko there, and that was a thing. And the fact, that was why I think Thorin, he was legitimately tired, because I think we only had 2 analysts,
and the funny thing
wanted
is,
Yanko,
the second major, Yanko was there, but Thorin wasn't.
Yeah, I know, right? So, you know, but in the Fox Theatre, the atmosphere was amazing.
Yeah,
you know, the acoustics really helped the crowd noise sell. We had amazing games and some amazing like CS moments there. The broadcast was great. I thought the ambiance, I thought it just looked nice. It was like a cut above what you would usually see. And yet at home, for whatever reason, it didn't seem to be translating via Twitch. And people were like saying, "Oh, dead crowd." It wasn't like that when you were there. So what do you think happened? Why is it that the Atlanta major isn't particularly well regarded?
I think it's because it was in the fabulous Fox Theater, if I'm being honest. You know, I think that it was so different, right? And we know how some people react to change, and I think that they see this like old theater and they're like looking at Turner Sports going like, you guys are fucking out of touch if you're in this old historic theater for a esports event, right? Versus like, if you're actually there, like there was something so special about that venue, and it's so almost tailor-made for esports, right? And so I think it's that, right? Like they're looking at this, they're at home, they're looking at this old theater, like they're seeing who knows what. But again, we for our finals, like we broke the Twitch record at that point. I mean, I think we still hold the one for our Boston major.
Yeah.
And I also think that they had come to expect a level of quality, which we had, but it was just like a normal event for, right? Like the pomp and circumstance and the hype and whatever. I think it was the same pomps and circumstances hype as our season 1 final. Right? Like our season 1 final that was in Cobb was like amazing, and the audience and stuff like that. But I think to them, it was like, oh, this is like expected. And I think it was a great event. I think we did a great job. I think we could have done better, and we did do better in Boston. And for our group too, it was a huge learning undertaking. And, you know, we're there, so we're a little bit biased, but I think people could probably also see that a little bit. You know, it wasn't from like a production standpoint, it wasn't anything kind of better than what we had already been doing, right? It was just in a really cool venue, and the venue had a lot of hype. And so like maybe for people at home, they're like, well, this is just nothing new. Like why is it special? Like, what is Turner doing? You know, what is ELEAGUE doing that's more special to make it a major? They're not doing anything more special because,
right.
You know, and maybe that's why. I don't know, right? Like, I don't know, as you know, right? Like, it's really hard to kind of gauge what the fuck goes through people's heads when it has to do with that stuff. But I also, you know, I think that there are elements like Metallica, like I'm going to put it on record. I was not on board with the Metallica tie-in for the Atlanta major. I was like, I
wanted them to fucking turn up and play.
If they turned up and played, great, right? Because their vibe is amazing. But like the video that like didn't quite, because it had to be from their new album, and none of the songs really meshed with anything having to do with, you know, ELEAGUE. And then also like if if that demographic knew who Metallica was. It was like more like Enter Sandman, like, you know, the songs are in the pantheon, you know, but, and so I think also maybe, and I'm not blaming it on that, but I'm saying like, I think that was like the fact that the major started with that, like it almost seems slightly out of touch with the audience that was,
yeah,
you know, especially at home.
That's an interesting point, actually, because I hadn't thought too much about the Metallica tie-in, not for a while, you know. I mean, we had obviously Skillet for the main theme of the TV show. And Skillet and CS is, you know, like mac and cheese. I grew up with all the Frag movies, you know. So
and I mean, the Jewels for Boston was like fucking perfect, right?
Yes,
like
exactly. But yeah, that was a decision that was like, don't get me wrong, because I remember when it came to me, we were like, somebody said, "Oh, we're doing a Metallica tie-in at the Fox Theatre," and I was just assuming, "Oh, great, Metallica are going to play that. That's pretty fucking rad, right?"
Yeah.
So that's literally what I thought was going to happen. And then when I was like, "Oh, it's just the theme tune," I was like, "Oh, okay, well, that's, you know, I don't know how many of the kids are gonna." I mean, Metallica now. I mean, I'm wearing a Megadeth t-shirt, so I'm showing my age. But you know, Metallica, even in 2017, you know, it's a bit passe. I would say.
It's always funny when you talk about your age, by the way, because I'm old, like 5 years older than you. And
yes,
so, like,
but you look better.
You make me feel super old. Everything you're like, I'm so old, and I'm like, man. After sitting here talking to you for 2 hours, it's gonna take me like 30 minutes to just get up from my chair because my hips are going to be in such bad shape. But
you can hear me coming down the stairs. I creak like I'm fucking Treebeard out of Lord of the Rings. It's ridiculous.
I'm just talking getting out of my chair after sitting. It's going to take like 20 minutes to just like stand up and stretch my body out again. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, that would be my answer, but I have no idea, you know, like I have conjecture and stuff like that, but two things, Metallica. No, I'm just kidding. The two things would be kind of how it started. Like, I think people were like, what is this? And then, you know, we just didn't do anything again, other than the magical venue that we were in, which I don't think translated well to, you know, what was online.
Interestingly enough, though, I will say this. One of the things that helped pull Thorin out of his tiredness slump was the Metallica song, because every time we come back from the break, you know, and I can't remember what the lyrics were.
It was like,
there's something to the flames, like that, right? And so,
to the flame or something.
Yeah, like a moth to the flame. That was it. But like Thorin would just be screaming in Moses' face, "Little Momo to the flames!" every time he's coming off a break. And basically, like, Moses was sick as fuck as well. But that, you know, 2 weeks of that, or whatever it was. But yeah, it was brilliant. The fact that we could sort of torture Moses pulled us through.
Believe it or not, I miss Thorin. You would believe that I miss everybody else, but I do like miss Thorin. And when Thorin was and I get a little dose of this with you too, because I miss, you know, talking to you and stuff. But for the esports award stuff, and I know Thorin's not on the board anymore, but like last year, Thorin would be like the main talk, and it was just so great to hear him and, you know, his point of view. And I don't know.
Yeah, people don't realize this, you know.
Guys,
yeah, it's like, you know, it was a good mix of different perspectives, and, you know, when we get in those creative meetings before a show, you know, when we were talking about how we were going to approach the episode and what stats we'd want to pull and this type of thing, you know, those meetings were great. We'd all be there, a little bit hungover from a late night at the W. You know, but obviously they stopped serving drinks at 4 because it's Atlanta, and I think they had a late license or whatever it was. And, you know, we get in there in the mornings and sit there. Moses would have his sunglasses on and a coffee. And, you know, those were great times. I think, like, you know, there was a mix of really cool ideas. Everyone was involved. We had good people like Jen, Leo, you know, augmenting the social media side of things. I think ELEAGUE social media was sort of unprecedented at the time, you know, in esports. And it was just a good room to be in. I mean, even when it was tense and people would be like bickering a little bit, there was always something good that came out of it, because it would go into the show.
I think everyone just had the knowledge that we all just wanted the best broadcast possible, right? And so like, even if we disagreed on approach or what we were doing, it wasn't because that person's dumb or a bad person or whatever. It's just we didn't agree on the approach. And I think that's really rare to find in large groups that are trying to get through shit, because a lot of people are like, well, and I mean, this is your daily life on the internet, right? Like, you have a different point of view. Well, fuck you. You're wrong. I'm done with you. You should eat shit and die. And I think that happens sometimes in corporate environments. And I think, I think Ben Winter and Daly, really kind of set the tone for how the production was, right? Like, you knew that Steve was running the ship, right? Like Steve Daly, who's an amazing director. Steve was running the ship, right? And we all had to fall in line, but Steve would listen to all of our suggestions. He would find ways to integrate them. He and Ben Winter had such an amazing chemistry too. And I think, again, that just set the tone for the rest of the production team. Yeah. And even when there are issues with talent and stuff like that, like, we were all just a really kind of open discussion kind of group. It wasn't like, oh, let's have this like secret conversation about how we're going to deal. Like, you and I had a very like upfront relationship. So like, if I had a problem with something that you were doing or something that you said or whatever, like, I would just pull you aside. You and I would have a conversation about it. We obviously didn't always agree, right? We definitely had different points of view, but it was always respectful, right? Yeah. And like, you knew that I wasn't coming at you from a personal level. I was just like, hey, stop doing this, or think about this differently, and blah, blah, blah. And then you'd give me your point of view. And then we'd come to some type of agreement as to, what the best way was to move forward.
Often your way.
I think that's important. Huh?
I said it would turn out, it would often be your way. Yeah. But yeah,
but I do think in my defense, I feel like looking back, like, I was pretty reasonable to talk to. It wasn't like, Richard, do this. It was like,
when we had this brouhaha over the fucking PGL talent announcement, which the mind boggles how it can be happening in this day and age, but I won't say too much on that. PMA before the major,
Don't drag me into that shit.
I noticed you were on the fucking sidelines, you conscientious objector.
I just watch. I don't have a big social presence.
Yeah. Well, no, but it was like, there were people going, it's because women don't want to work with Richard Lewis. I was like, one of the best bosses I ever had was a woman. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. It does boggle my mind, and we talked about this, like, you say a lot of shit on Twitter and you react on Twitter, and I do not agree a lot of the times with the way that you react, sometimes the way you do things. But like, when people say that you are sexist or racist, and I'm not the person that's getting on my soapbox like defending Richard Lewis.
No, but I wouldn't ask anybody to do it. I fucking hate that.
But like, to me, it's like, what? Like,
I know.
And we've talked about this stuff before. Like, again, we have very different points of views on a lot of different things, but like, that is not something that like had ever crossed my mind as like something. But also, I have nothing wrong with radical feminism, but also I also hope that your fears were assuaged that I wasn't going to create this all-female E-League. But I do feel like women in esports are very, very important, and there should be leagues and opportunities and equal opportunities for everybody to play. I will preface with that.
With that said, though, because it's a good little segue. There was talk at one point about, there was a couple of things. There was, most nominally, I do believe there was discussions at bringing, it was CLG Red at the time, potentially having them in the league. Is that accurate?
Yes, it was accurate. And I think that there are just a lot of discussions as to whether or not we wanted to put them in a position where, because a lot of the teams had qualified in, right? Or the majority of teams had qualified in some way. They didn't, and so if we all of a sudden just randomly added a team that did not qualify in, I don't think that does a service to anybody. Right? Like, I don't think that makes a league look good by giving them a special pass. And that's not a good look for, women's teams that are trying to be legitimate, despite, like, whatever gender they are. And
and that was my kind of take at the time. I was like, it'd be great to have them there.
I would have loved them there.
But if they get and whatever the fuck, however many games it was in the season, we've probably set women's esports back 2 years.
Yep. And so I didn't want to do that. Right. And women's esports is always I always feel weird about like separate leagues for men and women, because I do feel like esports is the great equalizer. It doesn't really, I believe it doesn't matter what your gender is. It doesn't affect your ability to play. I feel like the problem is where the more established esports, right? It was very, very male dominated. And then if you like go scrim, you want to scrim somebody that's also already a good team so you can get better. And so like the women's teams that are starting up, it's hard for them to find scrims because like the other teams don't want to play them because they want to play them more. And it's like this vicious cycle of just exclusion.
Yeah.
And the newer esports, it's great seeing them, Valorant's doing some great things for women and creating their women's league. But again, I'm always conflicted about having a separate women's league because that's just reinforcing this notion that they're not good enough to play with the guys, right? But I want them to have opportunities to play. So I think that, the Valorant League is amazing. And I'm so glad
Valorant's
that they did
been
it,
nailing it.
Doubling down on women in their game and in their esport. But it's one of those things that I do struggle with, and I'm not actually sure what the right answer is. So it was almost like laughable to me that somebody told you that about me, because it's like, I don't have an agenda because I just don't know it. Like, I just don't know what the answer is. And I'm not going to push an agenda, Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, it's one of these things. It really is difficult. It's been a difficult problem to solve in CS because you can't do a do-over in an established esport. Yep. Every change has to be incremental. Yep. And it's like you say, do we bring CLG Red in and feed them to the Lions to make some broader point about how there are women out there who can play.
Right.
And everyone at home that maybe didn't have a preconception about women's competitors, they just see a women's team losing and probably some, guys sneering about it. I don't think that helps, but equally, if we don't have, if we keep women segregated away from everyone else, well, that's always going to be the situation when we try and bring the number one women's team across. And so Valorant started fresh with a women's league and high-level individual women's players being integrated in with the men right at the start. And now nobody bats an eyelid to that anymore. It might not always work out, but it's way ahead of any other esport I've seen in terms of having that problem not solved, but getting there,
Yeah. I think at first I was excited when Overwatch esports had launched, because I was like, oh, this is one of kind of the most hyped esports. They have a real opportunity here to provide, equal opportunities for men, women, people from all over, whatever. They have this real unique opportunity. And then it was just like, nope, we're an all-male league. And it's not that they purposely excluded women. And, I don't want to go into the Activision Blizzard bullshit, but, it's not, because that's a whole other layer in what I'm saying, but it's not that they excluded women, but they had the opportunity because they were a new game. And I think that they squandered it, versus I think Riot were very intentional, right, in making sure that it was as inclusive as possible. The talent stuff is complicated too, to your point, as you had just said.
Yeah, well, this was the other aspect of it. The other thing I think we talked about, and I can't remember how close we were to having it happen, was maybe when it was clear CLG Red weren't going to compete, maybe getting some of their members to come and be on the desk as analysts.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about Miss Harvey and Potter, I think, were the two. And obviously, Miss Harvey's gone on become a lifetime, a Hall of Famer, Lifetime Achievement Award in esports, which more than deserved. She, both in terms of what she's done in the industry and as a competitor in women's esports.
She is
amazing. Potter has done a great job. She's a coach in Valorant now at Evil Geniuses, but she did a fantastic. She's the one analyst that I'm kind of a bit sad. You know, realistically now in my career, I'm probably not going to get a chance to work with her if she ever does decide to come back to it. But when I saw the work she was doing at Flashpoint, I thought it was really cool and a little bit different. And I actually really liked Potter. And, you know, we could have been the great start for her, but it didn't happen for some reason. And I don't know why, really.
Yeah, I think for CSGO, you know, the talent for the most part was pretty baked in when I had started, other than the stage host. And so we definitely made some decisions and stuff like that. And it, you know, and then at that point we had kind of our established roster. And we had those, you know, we had signed on people for kind of multiple seasons and multiple events. And that is also not to say we weren't 100% happy, you know, with most of the people that were on our talent staff for CSGO. So I think it was not difficult, but it was like, we had our talent budget. We had the talent already there. They were signed on for multiple seasons, multiple years. You know, I think that was probably a factor. I think we should have tried a little bit harder to maybe get them in on as guest spots and stuff like that, because we did get a couple people in from the industry as, you know, guest hosts. But I don't really have a clear answer for that. You know what I mean? Like the only real answer I have is like, we had kind of baked in our talent already and we had the kind of partnerships up there. But maybe we could have been a little more inclusive on the desk, right?
Yeah. Well, I remember talking to Steph about it at, can't even remember where it was, but it was sort of at the time. I think I was still at ELEAGUE, and you know, I think she'd said, you know, like, I'd love to do it, you know, like you can ask me, and I'm like, yeah, I'd love to have you, you know. It's just sort of not my decision. I mean, if you remember, after the first fucking season's drama, where I was the guy that sort of came in and sort of said, yeah, you should hire this dude. It'll be good if you hire this dude. I work well with this dude. I just recused myself from all of that afterwards, because all my mates were like, you're a cunt. They all hated the fact that I'd said, yeah, I think it'd be good to hire this dude. I wasn't saying don't hire the other dudes. I was just saying I'd like to work with this dude. Right. So I just said I can't make any of those, you know, can't give you that input anymore, because it's going to affect my personal relationships, and I'd rather it didn't. But, you know, it would have been cool.
We also wanted, when they were looking at talent, right? Like, we were trying to be, you know, using the A word, authentic to the space. Yeah. We wanted to get people that had a lot of influence in the Counter-Strike, you know, in the Counter-Strike world as casters and stuff like that. And so it's like, we hired you and Thorin, obviously. And then it became like pairings at that point. You know, it was James and Dan, and it was
Anders Semler,
and then Moses was there as our analyst. And like, these were like some of the most at the time, right? The most popular kind of esports commentators, action caller, you know, right. And like, so we had like the top of the top. And I think the thinking was also, it's like, later on, we can take risks and hire new people and bring new people onto the desk and stuff like that. But right now, as we launch, we don't want to be like, we're going to like reshape all of CSGO and redo all of CSGO and bring all these new people in and kind of do our own thing. And, you know, and I think that paid off for us. But I think that we could have done better in later seasons to get a little more, diversity in the talent that we had coming in. And I'm not using Sue as like, well, we had a woman, we had Sue and we had Rachel, you know, but we did try to kind of mix it up a little bit and bring, you know, them in. You know, Sue is, I can't say enough good things about Smix. I just love her to death.
It was great. We had her, we had Rachel, sat in the back, Kate Yeager for a few weeks as well. She was great. I remember getting absolutely steaming with her. Like, what a great night's drinking that was. That was a lot of fun. So yeah, we did employ some ground. Of course, I mean, we got Puckett a little bit, you know, who obviously I love him dearly as a friend, but he does make me sick because he's so nice and so good looking and so clean cut. Yeah, I know
he's so nice. He's so smart. You can't say a bad thing about Puckett, and I hate people like that. No,
Exactly.
but I love Puckett. He's just one of those guys that's like, he's just an amazing human being.
He just is like the
you
Tom
can't really
fucking
say-
Brady of broadcast talent.
Yeah.
I fucking hate
Yeah.
that asshole so much, but
I
love him
know.
all the same.
Do you remember Kristen Brown, who worked on the production
Yeah,
side?
yeah.
Like Kristen Brown, so smart, drop dead gorgeous, first of all, amazing mom, you know, amazing wife, amazing work, like colleague to work with. Just, you can't say a bad thing. The nicest person in the world. And I'm like, I hate you so much.
I know.
Why?
It's like holding up a mirror to all your own flaws.
Like,
it's fucking
yeah.
awful, you know, when you know
Where is
people like
this
that.
flaw? Tell me what the flaw is. I'll hate you less. But
look, I want to move on to the Boston Major, because I think that is the jewel in the E-League crown. Out of all of the projects we did, I think it's the one that people remember the most fondly. It seemed to transcend just Counter-Strike. You know, I've heard people from other esports talk about the Boston Major, and it was like, you know, it was insane. I mean, for me, I obviously biased because I worked it. I think it's the best major of all time. I really do. I know there's some discussion back and forth about the other ones. I think it's the best. I think what tops it off as the best is obviously the fucking fairy tale Cloud9 run. An amazing final, like probably the best final in a major as well. And you know, it was like the venue, because there's so many stories around Boston. I mean, first of all, people probably don't realize how close we came to an absolute disaster, because I know you were scrambling to get this off. There was that fucking super blizzard in Boston, wasn't there? And nobody could fly in.
Yeah, it happened like a week before. Yeah, I'm from New England. I was actually super thrilled to go to Boston. I mean, obviously there's bias because I was commuting from Boston to Atlanta, and the fact that we did an Atlanta major and a Boston major is maybe not a coincidence. But yeah, it was really fucking scary because you know, it was not just Boston, right? Like the Eastern Seaboard was getting hit by all this inclement weather, and we had people who were flying in, right? Not just for the finals and stuff that were up in Boston, but like all the different stages, we were down in Atlanta. So we were like, are we all going to get stuck in Atlanta because all of these flights are going to get canceled because everything is so backlogged because of this blizzard? And miraculously, like the snow melted, the clouds parted, you know, it was perfect weather. You know, in the middle of January, it was perfect weather for our major. Like I remember walking, you know, to the venue from the hotel because the weather was so nice in the middle of January. But yeah, that was really, really, really nerve-wracking and stressful, because it was like, okay, I guess like the alternative is, you know, we refund these tickets and we do the grand finals and everything here in our studios in Atlanta. And, you know, but I guess that's a risk you run anytime you run an event in New England in the winter. So. Yeah,
I mean, you know, but it was particularly bad. Like I say, it wasn't just a blizzard; it was a fucking super blizzard. So you know, and yeah, I remember there was some people who were being told, like, you know, we don't know if we're going to be able to fly in. I think that was the incident, wasn't it, where the Fnatic player Golden, they touched down, drove through like rush hour Atlanta traffic, and then came straight into the studio and played that game, I think. So that was like, it was real touch and go. The other thing, of course, was as well, like, as you say, it's one thing for an Atlanta-based company to host a major in Atlanta and you're just driving a truck down the road. They had to bring all that production stuff up to Boston, have all the crew assemble it, unfamiliar venue. It was like a mammoth undertaking. I remember, you know, because we got there pretty late into the, you know, because we were talent, but people were still setting stuff up, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It was real, loads of effort.
I think that if it wasn't Turner Sports, we wouldn't have been able to pull it off, right? Like they're used to working remotes. And so, you know, they can handle those types of things. I think if it was any other, you know, given the amount of kind of circumstances and setting up and stuff like that, I just don't know if we would have been able to pull it off given all the because we did have, to your point with the blizzard and stuff, I do remember we had like delays getting, trucks in, equipment there. We were worried that like the computers weren't going to make it up there in time, that we needed, because we were using them down at Atlanta. Right. And then we had to fly everything up. I think Minsick and somebody else like literally had the servers with them, like, in a box they had to bring with them on the airplane, because we just weren't certain that certain things would arrive on time. But it was such a great venue. I think it was the perfect size. And, look, I think we locked out with the matchups and the different matches that we had. But like just so much thought and effort went into how can we level this up? Like to the point about the Atlanta major, where we kind of just did a Turner Sports level production, right? Yeah. Like something that they had already come to expect from us, because we already finished our first season. We had already done some other events. And then we actually went to Boston and we're like, how can we level this up? How can we make, the fan experience better? How can we make this look good on camera? How can we make the stage the best possible stage that it is? And then you have people who have been doing this for a while, Dave Hansen. And I don't know if you ever met Dave Hansen. Dave Hansen is like the hero of heroes for Turner Sports. If you want something built or done and you talk to Dave, Dave will make it happen. So like, there's all this like last minute stuff, like we're building pieces of the set, of the stage and, doing all that and then adding things and adding effects. And like Dave Hansen, like just makes stuff happen. And so with people like him on the team, we were able to kind of pull it off, level it up. I think, we had a really great talent core, there. We finally got Yanko into our major. And yeah, I mean, that is probably one of the best things that I've done in my career. Just, you're there and you kind of almost like want to cry because the event is just so
let's be real. You did cry.
I did cry. I did cry. I cried
you
downstairs.
You and Sue were fucking.
Me and Sue were a mess. Well, Sue and I were a mess at like just the stress of the finals. Like it was such a stressful, game and match to watch. And then I think Sue started crying on, like she was trying, maybe she didn't cry on stage, but it's the minute she got off stage, she just like burst.
She held it together because obviously the famous meme, and this is what I mean about it being a great event. It had everything. It had the memes, it had the storyline, it had the production value, had the viewership. Like I say, it was it's the record. But the Skadoodle interview, obviously this was a player who, best will in the world, he'd sort of squandered his talent a little bit. He was the heir apparent to be like the best AWPer in MA, and it just never quite happened. He had a number of terrible games, and of course he turned up and put on an MVP clinic in the final. So you've got that, and then he's on stage, and that's when he said, I'm not crying, you're crying, because he was getting a bit teary too. I mean, he had friends and family that he brought up to come to the finals. He couldn't have dreamed it was going to go like this.
Yep. And it was against FaZe, which like they were assumed to win.
The super team. Yeah, it was their major.
They were the super team, and it was like.
But yeah, as soon as Sue got off the stage, I think Tyler had basically set her off. Yeah. And I saw from my vantage point, because I was on the elevated stage, I saw her just immediately. Like I could see Sue crying from like a mile away. Yeah. Yeah,
it was just, there's just so much like magical things that were going on at that event. And then even for me, like I could have, this was something, my friends and family understand kind of what I do. But I think it was always like, oh, Christina does the esports stuff. She works in video games and stuff like that. And I was able to have a lot of friends come to the event and like experience the passion that I've been trying to tell them about, and to kind of see that through their lens of people who just like give zero fucks about esports, but now really understand like why I do what I do. It was just an incredibly emotional time, but I don't remember why I started crying, but I did start crying downstairs.
I can talk a little bit about that. I mean, for me, like the stress again,
Yeah.
because I don't think people realize, like, I think there's this idea about esports, especially for broadcast talent. We turn up and we talk into the cameras and that's it. But, you know, for E-League, you know, everyone was like hands on pumps, and we really wanted this to be special, especially given the public reaction we'd had to the Fox Theatre event. And obviously, I'm sure you remember, this was the event where that nutcase was saying he was going to kill me. And so I was like being told, like, listen, we're going to put our best security bodyguard on you, and he's going to walk you to and from the stage. Nothing to worry about. I'm living in the corners of my eyes thinking I'm going to get like lit up or something, like in the middle of an event. And so I was pretty fucking stressed. You know, if I wasn't so pathetically macho, I probably would have shed a tear or two as well. But fortunately, you and Sue did enough for all of us, so I didn't have to worry about it. But I mean, I remember at the end of that event. Keep in mind, I'd got to do a cast with Henry for the show match, which that's how. I mean, I get me and him started as a duo. You know, it was like an unbelievable event for me on a personal level, and yeah, I was just I was exhausted by the end. I mean, I was done. It was just all that adrenaline just kind of dumped out of me all at once.
Yeah, that's definitely
we made it.
Definitely what happened. Yeah, that I think that's definitely what happened. It was just like the stress is over. You're holding your breath, you know, for weeks, right? Because this is not just okay, like you just turn up and you set it up and you just kind of run this event. There's just a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different things that were on all of our shoulders. And yeah, there's obviously complaining and controversy and stuff like that behind the scenes that are happening with some of the teams because they didn't like the way things were handled, blah, 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 blah. And so you're trying to manage that and trying to, you know, manage everything else on top of that. But what a great event. Like, just what a magical
how did the network respond to that? How did the suits react to E-League Boston? Because it kind of feels, honestly, like it's downhill from there. I mean, I know the only way probably is down because it was so great, but you know, by January 2019, there's no more CS events.
Yeah, I think that it was the best grand finale that we could have ever asked for E-League. You know, like it was received really well. You know, everyone was really proud of the work that everybody put into it and that everybody did. But I think maybe I was watching something you did, I don't know, but I think maybe you said recently, like, no one goes into a major thinking they're going to make money, right? No. They do it, again, using the marketing terms again, they do it as like a loss leader for their brand and to kind of build their notoriety and build, you know, their fan base and stuff like that. And, you know, I think that's what we did. And I think a lot of people were excited about it. I think it got to the point, especially kind of towards the end, that they're looking at it and looking at how much money that they're spending versus how much money they're bringing in. And, you know, it's not, we weren't working at a profit. At best, we were working, you know, just evening out. And they were like, okay, we need to start making money now, right? Like we need to, this isn't a loss leader. This isn't a fun experiment. You know, we did this really cool major. We've done it twice, you know, now let's kind of find ways to like cut costs and make money. And, you know, I think I don't think the cutting cost money and stuff like that was a reaction to the major. I think it was always kind of like, you know, we've hit it big, we've hit our peak, and like, let's kind of just like ride this and do the best that we can.
Yeah. I mean, forward. One of the other questions that people ask a lot in the community is, if you can't afford the regular show, why don't E-League just pitch for the majors and do one major a year? Yeah.
I think it requires I think what people don't realize, and you know this, it's not as simple as that, right? It's like, it's almost easier to have other things going on so things don't have to get spun up all over again. It takes more power. Like, you know, I'll use my iPhone as an example. My husband is like obsessive about like quitting the apps because I don't know why, like quitting the apps. And with me, I just keep them running in the background. And the reason why I keep them running in the background is because it actually requires more battery power to load up an app again from a dead stop, right? Yeah. And so I feel like that is kind of what it would be like for the majors. Like there's so much shit that needs to get rolled up, right? That you don't have that baseline because you're not consistently doing it anymore. And those tentpole, that's just not how Turner works, right? Like they do have their tentpole events, but they have other shit going on, you know, that complements all of that in the meantime. And it's just not really worth it to them from, you know, even a brand perspective to do that. And I also think, you know, they wanted to build a brand that was one that would exist and be persistent, and one that was synonymous with, you know, quality esports. And so if you only did CSGO, you just become like the CSGO major tournament organizer. And that's not what they're in the business to do. They want a diverse portfolio, right? And they're a business, so they have to sell against it and stuff like that. So it's like, leave it to the big tournament operators and event companies that are going to do that, especially if they're not doing, you know, consistent programming across the board.
There was another aspect to the Boston Major I wanted to talk about, and that was that obviously the event got attacked in the press afterwards for a few things. The most notable of which, again, it always comes back to Kotaku. Was they wrote an article called "The Counter-Strike Boston Major is Fake War, presented by Real War," and of course, the sponsors for the event were the U.S. Air Force.
Yeah.
And listen, I'll be honest, not a fan of military outfits sponsoring anything that's kind of aimed at the youth. And I didn't like it when they used to come into my hometown in those recruitment trucks, and they put out the nice, eloquent guy, you know, who was like, I'm blue collar just like you, but there he is, all physically, you know, impressive and in a nice uniform. I never liked it then. I didn't like it when I saw it in Sweden at DreamHack, where the Swedish military was literally had a game, basically, like, you know, where they were teaching Swedish children how to operate tanks and saying you should definitely join. And I didn't like that. And so there was this article that got wrote, basically was saying that like there was some sort of insane jingoistic crowd because we G'd them up with the Cloud9 run. And if you remember, people were chanting, send them home, which, by the way, you say that if you knock anyone out of any esports tournament, there's no...
You say that in any sports.
Yeah.
There's no stick and ball when there's a home team and an away team.
Kotaku were trying to imply it had a darker context. And then they linked it to having, you know, the military there. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about that, because I think it is kind of a, you know, I thought the response was bullshit, even though I can see some of the criticism being a little bit valid.
I mean, I've been in the game industry a really long time. I go to shows like E3, and the military have always had a presence, you know, at these shows. You know, I'm not going to speak to my opinion as to whether or not they belong or don't belong. But I don't think there was anything like nefarious about their involvement. I know there was nothing nefarious about their involvement. They've been involved in gaming for a long time. They're a big sponsor of, you know, different stick and ball sports leagues, right? Gaming, stick and ball sports leagues, Turner Sports, running an esports event. Like, that's why they were there, right? Yeah. And it wasn't just Counter-Strike that they were involved with, right? They're our sponsor for a couple different games that we did, you know, at ELEAGUE. And so whether or not it promotes war or not, you know, I don't know. But that was not, you know, the intent. And I feel like it was a reach for Kotaku to kind of try to link the two as being related in any way. And I think that the community received it as such, right? I don't think anyone really put a lot of weight into that opinion that they expressed. But
Yeah.
for as long as I've been in the game industry, I have seen the military be involved in some type of marketing capacity. So and look, I'm not a younger folks. I can see the controversy and, marketing to, people who are too young to even make decisions as to like what they want to do with their lives, but, or glamorizing it, right, to young children. I see that argument, but for me, I didn't even give it any thought. And maybe that's going to get me canceled because I didn't fucking give it thought, and I should have given it all this thought and blah, 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 blah. But they've always just been part of the gaming industry. They've always been part of the sports industry. So like, to me, it was like, oh, they're just sponsored. This is great. They're sponsoring our tournament. Right.
Yeah.
They weren't like overly weird about they weren't like, I don't know. They weren't like weird about it. And they're like, join us. It was like, here,
yeah,
cool shit. And we gave some money.
It's kind of tough because obviously I lived in America and I liked living in America. The worst American export besides their foreign policy is their social media presence. But when you live there, America's pretty fucking rad. I like it,
Mm-hmm.
And obviously anyone who's been to a baseball game or an NFL game or an NBA game, we're honoring the troops, guys. It's something that happens. It's pretty ubiquitous, and you can have feelings about that, but it is baked into American culture. And at American sports events, you're going to see that. What this author presupposed is that this was somehow unique and insidious,
right?
Which is a premise I obviously reject.
That's my point. It is not unique or insidious, right? Like, if you want, you can take to task both of
exactly.
those.
Yeah,
right. Like,
it's a societal
you can take to task the gaming industry, at least for the last 2 decades. You can take to task, the sports industry for however fucking long that, they've been advertising with sports. But like, our singular event was not this like nefarious controversy or conspiracy, to indoctrinate children into the military. It's like, it's like no pun intended, but like literally pick your battles. Like, this is not, it just, and again, when I saw that article, I was like, this is just fucking stupid. Like, it's just,
in a way, it's kind of a relief that they had to go to something so outlandish to actually criticize the event.
To criticize us, right?
Like, exactly. And they were always going to criticize. I mean, I remember that there was Polygon journalists there. There was talking. I know what the game. You don't give a fuck about our thing. You never have. You're interested now because you think it's going to get some clicks on your dying website. Yeah. But like, I know the game you're running. I know you're not here. I know when you ask me a question, you're not asking me because you genuinely want to hear the answer. You're hoping I'm going to say something fucking stupid, and then you're going to blow it out of proportion. Like they did with Ninja. He got interviewed outside of a toilet at an after party or something about that famous thing that blew up, where he said, "I just don't like to play with other women because I respect my wife." And then that suddenly makes him this like evil misogynist that's ruining gaming for women. Probably didn't articulate it, but why would you? Well, but why would you articulate it well as a throwaway sentence?
Yeah,
party, right? Like, it's So look, I mean, it's probably the same answer, but I mean, it is the Boston major. I mean, is it for you, like, out of all your achievements, is that the one you look at and go, you know what? When I shuffle off, definitely want to be remembered for that.
No, I think it actually isn't. I mean, it was one of the like great events, and probably one of the fondest, memories that I'll have of something that just, it all came together and it was fucking awesome. Right. But there are a couple things. One, and we touched on it before, is, I feel like we came in and we really leveled up esports, right? And it has surpassed where we even were now. But I do genuinely feel like the legacy that we left is like, we leveled up esports. Like, we did that together, and that was awesome. The best moment for me, even though there are a lot of things wrong with the first season of ELEAGUE and blah, 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 but the thing with me is, I started in February of 16, and I sat in those offices. Nobody was down there except for me, right? Like I was the only person sitting in those offices, and it was a blank studio. And we built ELEAGUE and launched like May 24th. Like that is a short amount of time to build the amazing thing that we built. And I just remember being in Cobb Arena, right? And we were just, we like our grand finals for our first season were great, right?
Yeah.
Like, and like going like, holy shit, like we just pulled this off, right? Like all the haters be damned. Like, yes, there were learning things that came out of it, but like we just fucking pulled this off. Like, and we did it in a short amount of time, and we did it at a quality that we can all be proud of, right? That to me is probably the proudest moment, just because of like all the haters, you know, that were coming at us. Like, I think everybody was, I used to say this all the time, but I think everybody was excited for what we were doing, right? But they were really prepared to see us fail. Like everyone just kind of thought that we would fail. They were excited, but they all thought we would fail, and we didn't. And we only got better. And I think we got smarter about things. You know, again, we were like such a super collaborative team. You know, I think that one of the things is the team that were the core ELEAGUE team that myself and a couple other people built. That is something that I'm super proud of as well. Yeah. I think it was a magical group of people that we worked with. And, you know, there wasn't anybody that you would just be like, that person is fucking cancer, right? Like this person needs to go, you know, like I think the whole team, like that to me is the stuff that like I look back on. It sounds really fucking cheesy, but like that's the shit that I look back on. The big stuff is the big stuff, and you can be proud of it, but it's like the little things are the things that like resonate with me the most. And I feel like I like walked away, you know, still relatively unknown, but I feel like I just made all these like very meaningful connections, you know, with people. Like if like, especially like people I can just call up and say like, hey, will you speak at my, you know, at my class? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm more than happy to, I'm excited to do it, you know, blah, blah, blah. You've spoken a bunch of times for my class. You're always one of the favorites. But you know, it's those types of relationships, you know, that I still maintain, and I still talk to a shit ton of people, from Turner, you know, and I think that's saying something too, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, you know, like when I went, wasn't really acrimonious. It was just, you know, my contract's expired. You know, it's, you know, they, to be fair, they made me a great offer to stay. It's, you know, I don't know if I can envision a world where I'm hosting the fucking Sims, even though I like the Sims as a game.
I love the Sims.
Yeah.
It's just not.
But yeah, I don't know if I can sit there and go, wow, this is incredible. You know,
this is incredible. He went and had a conversation. He established a relationship with her. Amazing.
Will he be able to seduce this Sim? Like whatever. You know? But yeah, I hope in a few years, you know, we all get to do sort of the definitive, you know, chronicling of it from start to finish, because it was just a hell of a ride. And I agree with you. I think, you know, at a time when there were so many high profile busts in esports, we came and we, you know, it might only have been for 2 years where we were at the top of our game, but took a long time for people to fucking surpass it, didn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you got to feel good about that.
I think it would just be a great, especially because of esports and just the level of event it was, especially for Counter-Strike. It would just be great to do like a retrospective and get like a lot of the key players, you know, that were involved in that major to kind of just be, to kind of look back, right? And give their, you know, give their point of view and just tell behind the scenes stories and stuff like that. Because that was just truly one of the more special events or things that I've worked on for sure.
Well, hopefully Turner will feel like doing it at some point. We'll wait and see. If not, I guess it'll have to be me. It usually is, isn't it? So look, just before, because we're in the wind down now, as I'm sure you're aware. I did want to say, obviously, you do something that isn't related to sort of product management and stuff now, and that is obviously that you've been working at universities putting together esports courses. So I did want to pick your brains a little bit about that, as I'm going to be wading. By the time this comes out, it'll probably be announced that I'm wading into the world of academia and are going to be lecturing on an official basis at a university. So I did want to just ask you about that and kind of moving into that, because I think the world of kind of esports academia, I think it's full of charlatans, and I think there are some courses are way better than others. So, I wanted to just pick your brains, for as much time as we have left, just about kind of moving through that and what value you think esports courses have in a university environment.
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, someone just recently asked me, is this what you wanted to do, like when you were, and I was like, this wasn't even a possibility. Like, this just wasn't even something that was even on my radar as a career, or something that I could even pursue. So like, I went to school and I was an economics major, right? Like, and then got my way into the gaming industry and have been in the gaming industry my entire career. And I look back and I was very fortunate to have had a great roommate in college that was like, there's this opening. I know you like video games, come be an assistant here, blah, 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 blah. And nowadays, looking at the industry, especially the esports industry and how it's evolved, you have people like the Sundances, the Sepsos, the Craig Levines, who saw a passion, right? And saw a need, and it was a wide open sandbox, right? And started these companies and really grew the industry into what it is today. They hired their friends, they all kind of like learned together and went through these growing pains. And so you have this huge layer up top of these super seasoned, super smart executives, right? That have built this. But the lower layer, right? You have a bunch of people that are passionate about esports, but have no idea how to apply what actual skills they have into the esports industry. And it is not good enough to just say, I'm passionate about esports and I want to get into esports nowadays, right? The industry has a maturity level that requires you to have some type of way to be additive to the space, right? Yeah. Other than you just being a person that wants to work in the space. And so I feel like, with me, who's worked in this industry for a really long time, and the program that I'm building, I know the kind of skills that are required, right? And how to articulate how they would apply those skills into, the real world of esports and the ever evolving world of esports. And so the majors, I think, that focus on that, right? And giving people an interdisciplinary background, giving them a solid overview of the industry, making them understand how the industry evolves, things like that. Those will prepare you. And those, I think, are very valuable. And they're also very unique to esports. There are very unique situations to esports, but those are very valuable in order to make you a good human and a good citizen that's going to be able to be as additive to the space as possible. Yeah. I think that there are some programs that they don't have people that have ever worked in esports before, right? And as weird as this sounds, they come at it from a very academic level, right? They kind of saw esports as a big thing. They go to some conferences, they read some books. I mean, we see this in esports, period, right? Of people trying to kind of enter the space. Oh, yes. And so they're creating classes just kind of based on an academic standpoint. I think the more kind of practical you are and you can give them real life experiences and things that you have worked through or you have lived through and how you've dealt with them, and maybe hearing their perspective as to how they would deal with it. Like, I think that's the stuff that is the most helpful. And that's my philosophy with teaching. You've spoken to my class. I've had a lot of different speakers speak to my class. I want to give them as holistic overview as possible to the space and different point of views in the space, because you have a different point of view of things and I have a different point of view. You have a different experience than I have, right? So let's hear about that. I think it's amazing. And I'm jealous of the school that picked you up, and I will pick you up when I'm hiring my adjuncts. So just so you know, but I think for you, one of the biggest things too is like, and this is interdisciplinary, is like just even like a journalism lens to esports, how to cover esports, how to cover what's going on in esports. And it's not just like, Cloud9 won the Boston Major, let's dissect what happened at the event. Like, it's really doing the investigations and doing kind of the thoughtful analysis of things that are going on. One, to be able to have an outsider that's not maybe endemic to esports kind of understand a controversy or, an item or something that's going on. But two, also making sure, and I know that you are super strict about this, is like making sure you have all of the facts. Yeah. And so that you are like virtually bulletproof, and that if somebody was like, well, where the fuck do you get that source? Like, where did you find this? Like, you're a fucking liar. You can be like, no, I'm actually not. Like, I have, this, or I have this documentation. Like, I think a lot of people confuse, and I think it's good that you're in there because you do have opinions on things and you're very clear when they're your opinions. But I think some people confuse opinions with fact and don't actually have anything to back up, their fact, right? Other than their opinion. And having somebody like you who is very anti that philosophy when you're writing your big pieces or important pieces, like, I think that's going to be one of the most valuable things that you can impart to any student, period, right? But esports students in particular, because they are so entrenched in the culture, right? They wouldn't be doing an esports major if they weren't, super passionate about that space and wanting to excel in that space. Having somebody like you that's like, yeah, I have a strong opinion about shit, and sometimes I'm wrong and sometimes I'm right, but I'm also very clear when it's my opinion versus this is a piece that I've worked on and I have proof, and you need to understand the difference between the two. It's I think the more people in our industry that get involved in at least helping educate or teach for some of the programs that they believe in the people that are running them, or, believe in what's going on, I think that's just going to help level up the industry as a whole. So, I think that you're seeing the top esports programs start to kind of emerge now, right? And the bullshit programs kind of are falling to the side.
Yeah.
And I'm building my program, right? And I'm hoping it will be one of the top esports programs. And, and I think that UNH, where you're teaching, I'll rephrase, where you're teaching, I think where you're teaching, it has a great program, as well. But Lasell University, where I'm teaching, I'm hoping that you come.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm also hoping that the teaching is going to help me a little bit. I don't know if it's helped you, but because I know you went through a period as well where you're probably a little bit kind of jaded with the way the industry's panning out, and I've kind of felt that, I'm kind of sort of laying down the sword and shield, and I want to tell a younger generation, yeah, there's a ton of fucking problems in this industry still. Some of them are the same problems that were there when I came in 16 years ago. I'm old and tired and can't keep, go. And I've done many a tour of esports. Now it's your turn, and I want to, tell them the truth, essentially. So maybe there's some bright spark out there that can come in and actually fix a lot of the problems once and for all, which ultimately that'd just be great for the space. So I'm hoping that happens, but we'll have to wait and see.
I just think it's not good enough to just say, I want to work in the space.
Yeah.
End of story, period. And I think that you helping this next generation figure out ways to get into the space in a meaningful way, right? And a lot of these schools that have these esports majors and a lot of these people that are mentoring, younger folks in the industry, I do have faith that the industry will improve and get better. You know, I'm hoping that it becomes a little more diverse than it is, you know, just even seeing the people that are rolling through the classes, it's not super diverse. I'm hoping to, you know, to get it to a place where it's a little more diverse, but I want the industry to grow. I want it to succeed. I want it to, you know, be able to persist, you know, even if it evolves on a daily basis. And unless you kind of prepare people to deal with that, it's going to be immensely frustrating for years to come.
So that's our time. I guess I'll let you wrap it up in a bow. Any final thoughts? Anything I didn't ask you or we didn't get to talk about?
I mean, we didn't talk about my cats.
Yes,
we didn't talk about my shirt that I'm wearing. That's a cat shirt.
Yes.
We didn't. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, it was just great to catch up with you. You know, I always enjoy talking to you, and I wish that, you know, we talked more, but I understand you're a busy man.
I mean, I am the worst for that. I'm just like a workaholic, although I'm getting better, you know. I had to be a workaholic these last 2 years. My head's been a bit fucked up. So the way I always cope with stress is I pile on more stress.
I also know, like, for you, if there's like a breaking something, like you are like a dog with a bone. So like you'll tell yourself like, I'm going to take a break from it all. And then like something will come up and you're like, I just can't let this go.
I know.
Without, you know.
To put it in context, right? So Stunner messaged me the other day and it's like, hey, can I just ask you a few things? You know, it's like, yeah. And it's 6 days later, and I've been because I've just been like, I'm writing on this match fixing stuff and everything else. It's like, God, it just never ends, man. That's my problem. It's like I you know, need to be able to turn off. That's the key. Like step away from the keyboard, you know, but can't do it, unfortunately. But I'll tell you what, I am glad to have caught up with you too. And I certainly hope you never step away from the keyboard, both literally and metaphorically, as I think your contributions to esports are, let's say, overall undervalued, despite them being excellent at everything you've tried your hand to.
They're valued just where I want, because then I can still stay behind the scenes. And so the tens of viewers that watch this episode,
well, let's see. Maybe
you can get a little bit of a flavor.
Yeah. Well, look, obviously, for those that don't know, that is Christina Alejandre. She's great, done so many good things, and we barely even scratched the surface with all the E-League talk. But I know that's what you guys wanted to know more about. So I guess we'll wrap it up there. As always, I don't know when the next episode of the Richard Lewis Show will be. I never do. I never plan these things. And nor do I know who the guest will be. But it'll be another banger, and it will be highly educational and enlightening. So make sure you tune in for it. Until then, make sure you take care of yourself. Goodbye.